Welcome to the Heritage Grant. Welcome to the Heritage Support Grants Program webinar. This presentation will provide an overview of the program and a tour of the online grant portal. My name is Bryce Gorman, and I am the fundraising educator for Local History Services at the Indiana Historical Society. This webinar is part of the Indiana Historical Society's Heritage Support Grants program, made possible by Lilly Endowment Incorporated. Here's an overview of some of what we're going to cover in this webinar. First, this webinar will provide an overview of the grant program, looking at the types of grants, process, and priorities of HSG. We'll also take a tour of the online grant portal we have applicants use to submit applications. It's also important to note that the objective of the Heritage Support Grants Program is to advance the care of and access to history in Indiana while increasing the capacity of organizations that carry out this work. So in order to be considered for a grant, projects must fit this purpose. Let's start with the program overview to help you understand the purpose and structure of our grants, as well as our funding priorities and eligibility requirements. So just a little bit of background to start with. This program was made possible by a generous grant to IHS from Lilly Endowment Incorporated. Lilly included $2.5 million to be regranted to Indiana heritage organizations. A key component of the Heritage Support Grant Program is education. We want organizations to learn more about fundraising and become confident and comfortable with philanthropy. This is made possible through a variety of outreach efforts, including fundraising workshops, local history services coaches, and opportunities for local history partners to serve on grant review panels. We're going to talk about each of these more in just a little bit. HSG has two different types of grants available. Both have the same eligibility requirements and funding priorities. The first grant is the mini grant. These range from $500 to $4,999, so anything between $500 and under $5,000. And the maximum project timeline is 11 months. There is no matching requirement. It's a one-part application process, and awards are usually made 6 to 8 weeks after the application deadline. Project grants range from $5,000 to $50,000. These require a 15% cash match as well as 100% board support. Board support can include financial support or volunteer hours. We're not going to go into too much detail about the match or board support today, but I would invite you to participate in our project grant webinar in the HSG grant series. We're going to cover project grants as well as the cash match in much greater detail. So there's a three-part process for project grants. The first step in the process is the summary of proposal. This serves as our initial inquiry phase. It's similar to a letter of intent or an executive summary that you might have seen in other grant programs. It affords you the opportunity to provide a brief synopsis of the need, solution, and expected outcome of your project. It also provides background information and helps the review committee understand whether the organization is ready to take on the project. This first step in the process is required in order to be considered for a project grant. If after reviewing your summary of proposal, the committee feels that the project meets the grant objectives, eligibility, and funding priorities, you'll be invited to submit a full proposal. Full proposals are due approximately 2 months after the summary of proposal deadline. The default project timeline for a project grant is about 12 months, so you have about a year to finish the project. You can finish your project in less than 12 months, but the timeline should not be more than a year. So the total turnaround time on a project grant is about 4.5 months from summary of proposal to grant award. I wanted to give you a little bit of a kind of a visual on the process. So here's a side-by-side flow chart. you can see that the larger project grants have more steps involved. So while both project and mini grants have final reports, the project grant also requires a midpoint check to be completed. The midpoint check exists to make sure that everything's going all right and address any issues before the deadline. Um, and so you can see on the mini grant, its full proposal goes to the reviewers, then grants are awarded, and after that 11 months is the final report. Whereas with the project grants, it's the summary of proposal before the full proposal, um, and then uh, it'll go to review, grant, midpoint. So there are more steps involved. In order to be eligible for Heritage Support Grant, organizations must be incorporated in the state of Indiana as a 501c3 nonprofit. They have to reflect history as a significant component of organizational mission and or propose a history-focused project. And these organizations must have an annual budget of less than $300,000. So if history is part of your mission, your organization most likely aligns with the purpose of the grant, which it's to improve care of and access to this history. But what determines a history-focused project? For this grant program, we consider projects that interpret, present, or disseminate a historical narrative. Um, these will be projects that tell a history story or provide useful historical information. So we get a lot of questions about whether ESG funds buildings and landscapes. We understand that these projects are usually very expensive and often difficult to fund. So the answer to that question is yes, if. Building and landscape projects will be considered if the building or landscape is primarily used to facilitate historical interpretation or if it houses a significant historical collection. In cases like this, we consider the building and sometimes the landscape to be part of the organization's collection. Um, we are not able to consider preservation for preservation's sake currently. HSG supports the preservation of historic structures, but in order to be eligible for this grant program, the structure must serve as the envelope to a historical collection, or it must be critical to historical interpretation. Again, if you have any questions about your specific project, please feel free to contact me. So you'll notice the little asterisks here with friends groups. So I did want to talk about that briefly. Organizations that operate under a larger parent organization can be eligible through a friends group or a nonprofit fiscal sponsor as long as the friends group meets the eligibility criteria. So something like this might apply to museums or say a local history room in a library. Um, but all friends groups applying for HSG funding, they will be required to supply a letter from their parent organization. This letter must confirm the parent organization supports the project. Grant funding will be held by the friends group as well. We also require that at least one representative of the friends group be on the project grant team. The grant project team. Just to be clear, this representative does not need to be the project manager. They just need to be part of the team. If you have any questions about eligibility, I invite you to contact me. If you are already in the HSG portal, please contact your coach. Our funding priorities are what we call intentionally broad. We realize that organizations have many different priorities and needs, and we want these grants to be as impactful as possible. For this reason, we've identified 4 broad areas of our funding priorities. Projects should fit into one of these categories. First is collection stewardship. Projects in this category are to address the storage and collections and associated documentation entrusted to the organization's care. This might include historic objects, structures, landscapes as part of the collections care. Next is diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, DEAI. These projects focus on efforts to ensure that diverse individuals fully participate in all aspects of organizational work, broaden organizations beyond public accommodations, and work to achieve genuine inclusion. Sustainability is another priority for HSG. This will include projects that focus on identifying and accessing internal and external resources the organization needs to achieve goals and improve sustainability. These projects meet the needs of the present without compromising its ability to meet future needs. Successful completion of a sustainable project is going to set the organization up for greater capacity to take important next steps. Finally, we have planning. These are projects which identify organizational objectives and assess organizational capacity. There are also funding exclusions. These are projects that are just not eligible for HSG funding. Many of them include what might be considered general operating expenses, such as rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance, retiring organizational debt, but also we do not do building purchases. We do not fund items for resale, so gift shop items. And we will not fund salaries, wages, or benefits for permanent staff. Just a little bit more information about personnel. We understand that many organizations need more people. For this reason, organizations may request funding for temporary project-specific personnel or consultants. One is organizations to hire permanent staff based on 1 year of funding. We do not allow for percentages of salary to be covered by the grant. If you have any questions about personnel or want to work out some of the details for a proposal that includes personnel, please contact me or your grant coach. This is actually a great segue. Staff member assigned to serve as your contact and mentor throughout the grant application. That includes throughout the whole award project and for reporting. Your coach will be assigned to you after you complete your online grant portal registration, which we'll talk about shortly. These coaches are here to answer questions. They can provide feedback. They are happy to review drafts. You can ask a coach tough questions or share concerns without fear. The coaches are not involved with the grant review panels. They serve to provide support to you throughout the applications process, and they step out of the picture during the review. Once reviews are complete, your coach will continue to offer assistance throughout project implementation and reporting if your application is successful, or they'll assist with feedback and edits if you wish to apply after an unsuccessful submission. I would urge you to use your coach. Do not ask them to wordsmith. Don't ask them to rewrite your entire application, but they're experts. They have heard so many questions and they are there to help. So please use them. I wanted to take a moment to discuss following professional standards, which exist for many areas within the practice of history. Grant reviewers look for evidence that applicants are using evidence-based best practices. One reviewer had an excellent quote about this. They said, "I always look for details that help me understand if the institution can follow a certain level of standard in the field. I search for information about the techniques they will employ. If an institution says they will use professional standards as outlined by, say, a particular article or is recommended or trained by a particular institution, it's very helpful. So, as you consider your projects, please remember that they must adhere to or help the organization meet accepted professional standards. In addition, as the sponsoring organizations, you are expected to have or be able to obtain the necessary professional expertise to carry out your proposed project. There are standards and guidelines available, including those for archives and collections, digitization, genealogy, historic structures, oral history, and museum operations. If you have questions about standards in any of these or even other areas, please contact your coach for guidance. If you have not already done so, I would urge you to spend some time on the Heritage Support Grants section of the IHS website. You can find this by navigating to the local history services under services from any part of the IHS website, or you can visit indianahistory.org/grants to go there to HSG directly. The HSG pages provide a great deal of information that can be accessed from the navigation bar on the right of your screen. There's resources page available. On this page, you're going to find information that will make your grant writing life so much easier. Resources will include grant application samples, the HSG budget template, glossaries for fundraising terms and collection care terms that were developed as part of our Hoosier Heritage Alliance project. Your most important stop on the HSG website is the grant program guidelines. Make sure that you take some time to read and understand the guidelines. Use them to reference some of the information we've already covered. And it'll also include helpful links to training information, staff contacts, and additional resources that will be helpful. If you have any questions after reading the guidelines, please, again, contact me or your coach. We are happy to help with this. We also offer free training. It's fundamental to part of to the educational component of the HSG program that I mentioned earlier on. Workshops are offered across the state throughout the year. You can find scheduled workshops on the training section of this HSG website, as well as under workshops and webinars on the local history services main page. In addition to these workshops, we also provide individualized training through fundraising site visits. We always seek new ideas for workshops and webinars, so if you have any special requests, please let us know. Let's walk through the grant portal registration process and see how to begin an application. Our grant application process is 100% online. We are not able to accept paper or emailed applications. Everything is handled through the online grant portal. It's an outside company to support the application, to support the application platform called Flux, F-L-U-X-X. And you will occasionally hear us refer to them. So let's do a quick overview. Anyone who isn't registered, this will be very helpful to setting you up. The first step is to make sure that you are using Google Chrome. The Chrome browser icon, it's the color wheel right here. So that's what you'll be looking for. And if you do not have Chrome currently, you can download it online for free. It's google.com/Chrome. You can access the online grant portal from the Heritage Support Grants web or market. It's going to start with an eligibility quiz. If your answers to the quiz indicate that your organization is eligible to apply, you will then complete a one-time registration. Those are the eligibility questions that we talked about earlier, being a 501c3, based in Indiana, history is the focus of the project, and a budget under $300,000. So as long as you are eligible, you should not have any trouble. After you register, you'll receive a username and password by email. and you can use this to log into your organization's grant portal. So I suggest everyone immediately test their login and password. While it's uncommon, if there are any computer issues, it is best to resolve them early rather than at the last second of the grant deadline. At this point, you can update your profile and begin the application. So I will say this now, and I'm sure I will repeat it later. Please, please, please save your work often. The application is cloud-based and may not automatically save your work. If you accidentally lose your internet connection, any unsaved work might be lost. I do not want that to happen to you, so please save often. As I mentioned in the previous slide, you can access the online grant portal through the HSG website. You will choose how to apply, which would be the section up here, and then you will click on the apply for a grant link, circled in red here. This will take you straight to the Flux grant portal login screen, which will look like this. This is the main grant portal login screen. Once you're registered, you will be able to log in by inputting the username and password that was emailed to you. Before you get that password, though, you have to do the eligibility quiz. You will start by clicking Take the Eligibility Quiz here. And again, the questions are designed to help organizations determine whether they fit our grant eligibility requirements. We would not like any organizations to have to go through the process of applying, putting together documents, only to be ineligible. If you cannot answer yes to all three questions listed here on the left, please contact me, and we will see what we can do after that. But otherwise, eligible organizations will be directed to the registration page. This is the registration page. It's important to note that the red text printed here, the registration submitted after 4:30, this process is not automated. Each registration is verified by a member of the team. It's a verification of nonprofit status, that there's no issues with the IRS and so forth. As such, it could take up to 1 business day for the registration to be approved and to receive your username. All the bolded fields that you'll see here, name, title, organization, those are required. If you do not fill them out, then it will not let the registration go through. So you won't lose the work, but you'll have to input some information. This is a one-time process, though. It's just going to verify the eligibility and allow you to access the grant portal. Just a note, completing the registration is not the same thing as submitting a grant application. That is the next step that happens once you receive your username and password. Once you're registered, though, you will be going back to the login screen. Remember, this is where you initially click the eligibility quiz, but now you'll have a username and password, so you can put that information here. You can continue to use the HSG webpage to access the grant portal. Just a couple notes. If you want to, you are welcome to change your password. I can also change the password for you. If you do not see an email from me or another member of the grant team, check your spam folder. Every now and then, a email filter will move some of this into the junk mail. Once you've logged into the grant portal, this is the page that you should see. At this point, you're going to need to choose either project or mini grant applications depending on which you intend to submit. But I did want to touch on a couple of the other things that you can do here. So the applications, they're highlighted in red. You can update your own information, either your personal information or the organization's. Let's say you change emails or something in the organization changes. You can update that here in the blue highlighted area. And once you've received HSG funding, you will be required to submit a report, either the midpoint check-in or the final report, and those can be accessed here in the yellow box. So we will start the application. Um, one, uh, one thing that has come up fairly often before we go any further, it is highly recommended you copy your answers into a separate, usually Word document. Again, just in case something happens, the internet goes out, or there's a bug with the computer or whatever, this lets you have a backup. So we'll go into detail for each question in the grant specific webinars, but I wanted you to see what it looks like just for the overview. Please note, all applications will be required to watch an ethics webinar and confirm it on the application. It is, once you've watched the webinar, it will just be a confirmation checkbox. Both the mini and project grant applications are going to include questions about your organization's fundraising. Although review committees may look at this information to determine if your organization has experience managing grants, we primarily use this information for our own data collection purposes. This allows us to better understand the extent to which organizations are doing fundraising on their own. All we ask is that you answer them to the best of your ability. This is the budget form required for all grant applications, mini and project. We also will require grantees to use this form for the end of grant reporting. Again, we will go over this template in greater detail for specific grant webinars, but I did want you to see what the document you will put in, and it's an Excel spreadsheet. You'll put in your information, and then anything that you're using for income, HSG funding, and then your expenses. Again, we will go into this more in detail for the grant specific webinars, but I wanted you to see this. The final section of the full proposals, mini grants and project grants, will be the additional documents section. This section calls for a mix of required and optional documents. The required documents are the organization's annual budget, the project budget that is on the HSG budget template that I just showed you. These are two separate budgets, just to make that clear. We also require your board member list and a copy of your IRS tax determination letter. The tax determination letter is not your state sales tax exemption letter, but the letter that your organization received from the IRS to confirm your nonprofit status. If your organization will be applying under a friends group, you will be required to submit the letter from the parent organization confirming the parent organization supports the project, there's a member of the friends group on the project team, and that grant funding will be held by the friends group. Optional documents include 2 letters of support and any additional documents you think will help strengthen your case. This might be contract quotes, before photos to document the current condition of an item or a structure, design plans, drawings, variety of other materials. I do suggest you be judicious in selecting your attachments. You don't want to fatigue reviewers by adding unnecessary documents. Until the point you submit your application, you will see the grant status listed as draft. Should you need to stop working on your application and come back to it later, you will simply save the work and log out. Again, I highly recommend you save answers in a Word document too. When you log back into the grant portal, you will find your saved application under drafts in the left-hand side, which would be the box on the left. So when you are finished with your application, all the uploading the required additional documents, and you're ready to submit it, you're going to want to save the form and click the submit button at the top of the page. That would be up here. I do recommend printing it and making sure that before you hit the submit button, it is a good idea to review all the attached documents, and it's a good practice to share the draft. A second set of eyes may spot an issue that you just did. And once the application is submitted, it will move from drafts into the submitted application folder. You will no longer be able to edit the form, but you can print. Just as a reminder, please be aware of the submission due date. Applications will not be accepted late. Let's look a little closer at the review process. As I mentioned before, the grants are reviewed by external committees. LHS coaches are not involved in the selection process. The reviewers are history, museum, and nonprofit professionals, including representatives from our local history partners program. We feel it's important to make sure that each review panel includes the perspective of at least one small museum or a local history representative. In addition, we believe that reviewing grants serves as a fantastic learning opportunity and can help organizations improve their own grant writing skills. If you're interested in possibly serving as a grant reviewer, please feel free to reach out to your coach or a member of the grant team. You'll find on the right, this is the criteria we provide to the review panel, and it's in line with the applications. The projects need to fit with our funding priorities, present a compelling need for support, and the reviewers are going to look for evidence of institutional readiness. That is it's clearly the right time and place for the project. They want to see a well-designed project with a thorough plan for implementation. The budget needs to be reasonable and complete, and the intended results need to be clear. So reviewers want to know what your intended outcomes are, how you're going to track them and measure, and what they will contribute to your organization's overall stability. We will have a draft of the review document on the website, so you can look at exactly how reviewers will be scoring any applications. In addition to your coach, who's assigned when you register, you can also contact any member of the grant team if you have any questions or need additional information. Our contact information is right here. It's on the website. And I want to say thank you for taking the time today to learn more about the Heritage Support Grant Program. And I hope that you'll join us for future training opportunities. So thank you very much.